call this Board of Aldermen meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, could I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Bowman.
Present.
Alderman Bowman. Here. Alderman Milner.
Here.
Alderman Dickerson.
Here.
Alderman Long.
Here.
Alderman Turner.
Here.
Alderman Levinson.
Here.
Alderman Reese is absent. And Mayor Hassel.
Here, and we do have a quorum. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we do have one ceremonial matter. It's a proclamation that we do every year. It actually gets it actually just gets sent out. We don't have anybody here to accept it, so with that in mind, I'm going to read it from up here rather than out at the podium tonight. We had a proclamation for Small Business Saturday, November 24th, 2018, where Small Business Saturday is celebrated annually on the Saturday following Thanksgiving, and whereas in only 8 years, Small Business Saturday has become a powerful movement and more people are taking part than ever before. And whereas Small Business Saturday is a way to celebrate the uniqueness, charm, and economic impact that small businesses bring to their communities. And whereas Harrisonville is home to a number of small businesses who are primed and ready to help their customers kickstart the holiday shopping season. Now therefore, on behalf of Brian Hassick, Mayor of the City of Harrisonville, Missouri, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 24th, 2018 as Small Business Saturday in our city, and I encourage all residents to support their local businesses and shop small on this very special day. So, the holiday season is upon us. All right, that's it for our ceremonial matters tonight. At this time, I will open the floor to public participation. Anybody who has anything to bring before this board that is not on our already scheduled agenda or on the agenda, you may step forward at this time.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Board.
Good evening.
Good to see everyone. I would like to address agenda item B under item 6 under a little bit. I know the board's considering changing this ordinance. It's my opinion it's not broke. At your last board meeting, the question was asked about gravel driveways. City planner answered there had been 2 waivers, Coffee and Lytle. No mention of the waiver at 501 North Main. The zoning board adjustment probably done the right thing on the 450-foot Coffee waiver and the 925-foot waiver at the little Lytle property, and possibly the one at 501 North Main. It appears to me there's a conflict of interest of a board member vote on this ordinance. Doesn't the record show he is the owner of 501 North Main Street? If this is a fact, he should recluse himself from the vote. The Beck Event Center also asked the board for a waiver on paving the lot at South Independence Street. Their plea was the cost overrun on the remodel of the old building. We all understand cost overruns on remodel. But in my opinion, when the owners accepted the special use permit, that was a contract. That special use permit asked or required that that lot be paved. I think it's this board's responsibility to the taxpayers that contracts are fulfilled. The American Disabilities Act enter into this issue. Handicap items such as wheelchairs, walkers, and canes don't do well on gravel parking lots. Plus, it's the law that parking lots be paved. The factor of paving is a matter of economics. We all understand that. I would suggest that this board table this ordinance for tonight, work out a plan with the owners, protect the clients of theirs that comes to their center, and help them work out a reasonable way of getting that lot paved. I also would like to remind the board that mailing out first-class letters to notify people of Zoning Board of Adjustment and Planning Commission on redoing ordinances such as this and waivers should be done with certified mail, not first-class mail. Then I have a question that I would like to know: where does the city and the taxpayers stand with the Walmart distribution center? About 2 years ago, it was presented to this board that the bonds would be paid off and that this city was responsible for the sewage holding tank and/or replacement with a lift station and a sewer line. I'd like to see something in writing about the bonds and the sewage problem. Finally, Street Talk has it, the owners of the car wash at South Commercial Street in Oakland would like to replace 2 bays of that car wash with 2 automatic bays. Automatic bays would require a 600 amp service, which we understand that. Word on the street has it that they were told the electric impact fee would be $20,000. First knee-jerk reaction of this, if it is true, the odor of corruption is strong. My question is the board aware of what the responsibilities have been assigned to the hired help? Can you imagine how deep a breath you would take when you thought you were providing a service for this community and you were told that you was going to be paid $20,000 up front before you ever earned a penny of income? A conversation like this has an impact, all right, one of disgust. Any questions of me?
Well, I will comment, I've heard nothing of an impact fee. I've had no phone calls. I've actually fielded that phone call before from a couple businesses on the square back in 2015 that they were presented with that almost exact figure, and I hit the floor and I immediately took action and we remedied the situation. I've heard nothing of any question asked, nothing brought to me that, hey, there's an impact fee, there's a question about it. It's definitely something that would get my attention if somebody asked about it, so if it's hearsay, I had not heard it.
Well, it amazes me that we have this kind of conversation on the street if it's not a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate your concern. Mm-hmm. We need to look into this.
Yeah, like I say.
This is bad. B-A-D in capitals.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of one, and I haven't, like I said, if it was brought to my attention, I definitely would have addressed it, because I have heard nothing. When it was brought to me before, I immediately brought it to the board to discuss, and we were able to take action. So if there is something going on, I'd sure like to know about it firsthand. So,
thanks for your attention. Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak this evening? Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I have exciting news. After a year and a half of work trying to get the Vietnam Memorial Wall to Harrisonville, Missouri, we have received our date of June 27th through July 1st.
Good job. That's amazing.
I've already got tons of interest, tons of offers to help from the community, and I wanted to come tonight and first of all thank the council here for allowing us to attempt to bring this in. It's been a short process since we talked, but I've been working on this for quite a while. I've got here tonight the district commander for the American Legion. He hosted this same wall in Windsor, Missouri. And in the small town of Windsor, which is 5,000?
2,900.
2,900. That 5-day period, they brought in 20 to 25,000 people to the community.
Wow.
So we are way closer to Kansas City and the metro. And so we're gonna have a very good crowd, a good draw. I've got a lot of work on my hands. So what basically I wanted to give you just kind of a rough overview of some of the manpower, and this is just minimum that I just glanced over our contract that I just received last week. Gonna need minimum 10 volunteers for setup and tear down. The wall will need to be lit. We're going to have lighting for the evening. A minimum of 2 volunteers just to walk the wall and help with the any questions or help people find the names. I'm going to be reaching out to our restaurants to hopefully donate food to the volunteers. We're going to need a tent to put up so that volunteers have a place to take a break and get away. And the outreach I've got from the community has been amazing. And this is going to help heal a lot of wounds for people that couldn't make it to Washington. So I just wanted to address the city. Whatever we need to do for permits and everything else, I'm available for anything that we need to do. I will give my information out to anybody that is willing to help, wanting to help. We will take all the help that we need. And then we just had our meeting, and we just approved the contract, and they are right now writing the $2,500 deposit check. It cost a total of $5,500 to bring it in. And we have to provide a suite. Hopefully the new hotel down by Sutherland's has the suites. I really don't want to set them up, you know, some of the older ones, you know, we want to represent them to a nice place. We've got to provide a room for them for 6 nights. And so, I can't thank you guys enough, because this is my pet project. This is something that I've got family that's actually going to be on that wall. So,
Happy, are there any permits that they'll need?
And you're having this at the Milwaukee Mall Family Center, aren't you?
yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's on private property.
Okay.
So I think we're.
I mean, my suggestion was anything that was needed, I would like to see the permits, no charge, if there was anything that was needed, because this is obviously a good thing for the community and everybody involved, but it sounds like that's not even an issue, so.
What, where it's gonna be staged at is if you're standing in front of the Family Center, looking at the front of the building, to your right is that old soccer field, right next to there, that has the road that goes in between it. That's flat, smooth, and it measures out to where we have plenty of room. So, do you all have any questions for me at this point?
I know the wall has to be guarded at all times.
Yes, sir.
Volunteers. So, I mean, how many do you have to have at a time?
Minimum 2 guards, 24/7. Basically, the way they work is you treat it like you're in Washington DC. You know, no kids horseplaying around it, no, you know, it's a sign of respect and a little time to heal.
Now, also, I believe you guys are getting a helicopter to come down
Yes,
too?
we have, Mr. Roberts, Ed Roberts, is also a member of the Vietnam, organization as well. And so they have a Huey helicopter that is seen service in Vietnam and is going to be on display. We're working on, or trying to work on to see if it's still available. There was a Vietnam museum that set up stuff, and we're going to be working on that as well. So it's going to be really insightful and a nice representation of everything for our Vietnam veterans and their families. We are forming a committee, and I want the committee not just veterans. I want business leaders, I want people that can help network, that can help, you know, in transportation and everything else. And we are starting our November 13th, which is a Tuesday, over at the American Legion across the street, is when our committee meetings are going to start. And we're going to have them once a month until we get closer. Once we get closer to the date, then we'll go every 2 weeks, and then every week once we're right on our date. So if there's anybody that is interested in being on the committee, we got a lot of work, and we will use all the help that we can get. And I would like to turn the microphone over, if I could, to Commander Bill Anderson, kind of give you an idea of, since he hosted the wall, what Harrisonville's looking at.
Thank you. We brought the wall in about the same time frame. It was actually 4th of July weekend in 2016 in Windsor. We had rain pretty much the whole weekend, and we still had over 25,000 or 20 to 25,000 people come through. It was really hard to get an accurate count because they just kept coming in waves. This is a pretty big deal for Harrisonville. Some things that you may want to think about from the city's point of view is going to be traffic control, getting people there on, you know, to the site and off and back onto the highway safely. You're going to have people that probably want to come through town, so it might be a good time for some of your businesses to hold some specials and things. We utilized our time fairly wisely. We did not have any protesters. However, Concordia, when they did it the year before that, did have. So I would highly recommend you have a site for the protesters to go to so that they're not right there at the side of the wall. And other than that, I'm here to answer any questions you may have. And hi, Matt, how are you?
Anybody have any questions?
You know what it is.
All right.
You know what it is.
Well, that's very exciting. I think it'll be a good thing for the community. It'd be interesting to see what kind of numbers we can turn with our location being so close to Kansas City and other cities. So.
And I would be happy to come back at any time if you need me for anything.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regarding something that John brought up about our special use permit, I want to thank the City Council for giving us a special use permit and allowing us to do business in the city of Harrisonville. Unfortunately, Beck Events does not own a parking lot in the city of Harrisonville. Does not own any property whatsoever in the city of Harrisonville. And can't really tie the company that doesn't own a parking lot to fixing someone else's property. Another company based in Jackson County owns that parking lot. And of course, Beck Events does use it, so does the dentist's office and Cass County Psychological Services. But Beck Events does not own a parking lot in the city of Harrisonville. Just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you. Any
Who's the
questions?
contract with then?
Huh?
Who's the contract with?
Who owns the parking lot?
No, who's the contract that was signed that the
Beck Events.
Huh?
Beck Events.
That the lot would be paved? Who signed that contract?
Beck Events. Beck Events got the special use permit, but does not own the parking lot.
Who does?
JJF Properties,
And who's JJF Property?
another company.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else this evening?
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Freeland. I'm one of Scott's business partners with Beck Event Space. We've been trying to figure out a way to pave the parking lot down there. Met with a lot of great people here with a lot of great ideas on the local community, the Board of Aldermen. Recently, I met with someone from the Planning and Zoning Commission, Chris. Thank you. And discussed ways that we could look at doing a public-private partnership on the space, and that's kind of where we're at right now. We've got, I've got an estimate for the parking lot, and it's just not feasible for us to do. We weren't trying to enter into the contract and not be able to fulfill that end of it. I also feel like, I apologize, I thought I had pictures for everybody on the Alderman, because I went around and took, there's over 24 spots on the square down here that have gravel parking lots. And so we'll have to share a couple of these. These are, sorry. First ones are the Beck Event Space parking lot. If I can borrow a couple of these. There's somebody else I can borrow real quick. So some of these were the Beck Events parking lot. It was on a Monday or Tuesday. I took these photos so you can see, like what Scott referenced, there's the dentist office, Dr. Tracy uses the parking lot, the psychologist uses the parking lot, the engineer on the corner. I know for trunk or treat, I think there were 70 or 80 cars down there. We certainly, even though we've got private parking lots, we just basically need it for our 40 or 50 events a year that we do on the weekends, which is basically, if you do the math, 52 weekends a year. If we're lucky, we'll get 50 weddings the weekend. This weekend, we've got 2 events, and then we're donating our space on Sunday for the Veterans Celebration down here, starting at 10:30. It's going to be an amazing celebration in conjunction with the 100th year of the signing of the armistice in World War I. Last Friday, we had the Chamber of Commerce with the Love the Square at the Beck Event Space. Once again, we donated that. Scott may or may not want me to talk about all the philanthropic things we try to do. I know John just did an amazing thing donating the thank you for the, I don't know if anybody knows, everybody read that in the paper, but John donated, his wife donated the old Cass County Publishing for a museum down there. What I would encourage you to say is, I think everybody here in Harrisonville, everyone on the Board of Aldermen, we want the square to come back. We have done everything we can to bring it back. At our part, I know that Dr. Tracy, they told us they'd been looking on the square for years, and once we made the investment down here, that kind of triggered them to be like, okay, we're not on an island down there. I know Mike and Fran on the coffee shop. There's a lot, we're still kind of in a bubble where can we go forward with that? Once again, I'm looking at all kinds of avenues. I will tell you that a few years ago, I never quite understood when we had the building, the lot is disconjointed from, it's not attached to the building. I know part of the ordinance is if we ever improve the lot itself, build something on it, things like that, we would have to improve that lot, bring it up to code at that point. Just because we're grandfathered in doesn't mean we're going to not take care of our property or not. You see, the American Legion's got the same. They've got the handicap parking that's all on the gravel lot. We've got parking in front of our building that's on concrete. You know, once again, I've been told to look for maybe some creative solutions, things like that. I do have 8 copies of this. This is an email chain that's gone on in the past month from maybe we can share it with Chris and I. He brought an engineer down and said, hey, you know, let's look at some. On page 2 is the estimates on engineer he brought down. Never got back with me on a final bid. Of course, everyone who bids a job wants to do due diligence without, they don't want to jump in knee deep until they don't want to do work for free. So they're like, well, there's city permits and there's, you know, this is the approximate construction fee. Needless to say, I was shocked at the number that we got on there. I know a few years ago, Scott got an estimate of, I think, $300,000 for just, was that an asphalt type lot without any drainage system, things like that, and was kind of, he was frustrated because he was scoffed at that price was so high, and I don't know, I mean, it's, if there's a possibility that, you know, the city wants to put in a parking lot and use it 5 or 6 days a week, and we use it 1 day a week, you know, we're open to suggestions. I don't know if the city of Harrisonville has $500,000 to $1 million to spend on the lot. We sure don't. So, and then once again, those were rough estimates coming in without all the due diligence. So, the other thing I'd like to point out as well too, I do have pictures that I can pass around here. There's been comments that our property or the parking lot is a big eyesore on the square, and I think that there are eyesores around. I think our building was the worst building on the square, but I think the eyesore behind our parking lot is what is maybe bringing out that notion. I've got some more pictures to pass around here as well too, if I could. Sorry, I don't have these organized as well, but I'm just going to pass out some of these to kind of look. Also, I've got pictures of parking lots on the square that are up to code according to the book. So once again, John's, I know said before, like, you know, we got to use common sense on things as well too. And when you look at some of the parking lots that are up to code, I would think that our gravel parking lot well exceeds anything that you see on some of these pictures that are up to code. So I'm not, you know, not trying to, I don't know. I mean, certainly, you know. Does anybody have any questions for me as I pass out these photos?
I have a question.
Yes.
So the people that actually
Could you
own,
use your mic, please?
sorry, the people that actually own the lot, do you guys rent it from them? How does that work?
Scott, do you want to talk about
I
that?
was just curious.
Yes.
Okay.
We have a lease for a little bit of money
Yeah.
to that company.
Okay. Okay. I was just curious
And
how
it-
that was working.
You know, obviously, it's the same company. I mean, you know, I own a company that owns JJF Properties, and I own a company that owns Beck Events, and Mike owns a company that owns the other half of it. So we are the owners of that parking lot, but Beck Events space is not.
The reason why Scott brought that up is because it could very well bankrupt my wife and I if we have to go to the bank and say, hey, we have to do this parking lot. And so, you know, we're setting up for, we don't want a legal battle. I know Scott put that in there. I was blindsided that he said that, but it is true that we just, I've talked to people on the board like, hey, please, we put every dime in there, and once again, John said, you know, it was true, like you can't, you know, there's cost overruns. When we're 35, 40%, and the other buildings on the square have been 50% over, and they're still sitting there, like, I'm point I'm pleading, like, please look at this and see what we have done, and it's amazing. It's really been almost a miracle with how everything has fallen in place up to this point, where it's like, okay, how did we do all this? Once again, there's paid, that is up to code right there.
Okay, so I just have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I asked you a few minutes ago who owned the property, and you just kept saying Beck Event Center didn't own it, which Beck Event Center is a name, obviously. But there are parent companies, so technically you do own it.
Yes.
So
But
that
Beck
was my
Events-
question. And I didn't mean it to be offensive or outlandish or anything like that. I was just trying to get a grip on, if you didn't own it, why would you have signed that lease, or the agreement to pave it? Now, all of that being said, I think all of us sitting up here understand, we are thrilled beyond belief to have you all here in town. We think it's an amazing opportunity that you have provided for the community and people around here to come and have a place like this to go. I don't think any of us would love to see you go bankrupt in any way, shape, or form, or be under any kind of a hardship. I don't know if you want me to keep talking, or if you want me
We're
to
actually
wait
not on
later
that
on.
ordinance, so
Okay.
it's really, this is their time, so.
Okay.
I mean, if you had
I'll wait and
if
say
you
the
had a
rest of what I
question on
want
the
to say
answer,
later.
that's really the appropriate, just to get an answer,
Okay.
so.
But I do
Anybody
have a thought later on.
Anybody have any other questions?
So, this meeting you had with Chris, was just you and Chris? Or?
When I was at the Planning and Zoning Commission, it passed 5-2. Chris was one that was not in favor of changing the code. He thought that anytime you change the code, that it just instantly meant business is gonna take the easy way out. We have not taken the easy way out, but he said, hey, I got 10 conferences, I've got some ideas for you if you'd like to meet. I'm all ears. I said, hey, I contacted him, he gave me his card, I emailed. He arranged a meeting that we met in the parking lot. And he's like, I'd like you to, look at this option. He's like, once again, it was in the parking lot, he brought people there, and, Judy came to that meeting, and Judy, I appreciate you coming. Linda just basically, she lended an ear, I think, more than just say, hey, we're looking for, you guys are first movers in here. We want to see this property improved. And so, once again, when I got these numbers, not even the final numbers, and I mean, when Chris said he would bring somebody down here to work with us, and then he brought Burns and McDonald, I mean, I was a little bit shocked that, when, City of Kansas City can't even afford Burns and McDonald to do the airport. They went with the cheaper option, and now it's doubled. So, if I need to plead to say, we will improve this property, we have already improved this property, but we just can't be forced on a timeline when we can do that. My other question would be too is, and maybe this was covered years ago, but the physical property, the historic building that we went through the process of following all the guidelines to keep it on the historic registry, we've got that final paperwork, it took almost 3 years to get. The property, the lot itself is not attached to that. There are over 400 parking spots on the square. So if we didn't buy that lot, which once again, if you go to Google and look at that lot, I'm praying that Google will come down here and update the photos at some point because it looks horrendous. So we're like, don't pay attention to Google, but if you look at that, it was used as a lot before we bought it. So we're not asking for any special privilege. We're saying we use it at the lot, we tore down the fences, we graded it. There was, once again, of all these blessings, the county came to us within probably 6 weeks and said, hey, we're gonna improve Mechanic Street and spend $1 million. We wanna park our trucks and what can we do to help you? And we said, fantastic, can you help level some of this? And so that was once again, it was a blessing because we had no idea from the opening bid. And once again, if you guys put the hammer down on us, I'm just telling you, like, I don't know how those other buildings are gonna move. I've looked at them, I love some of those other buildings, I've tried to cash flow because our event space is so big, could we look at one of the other smaller spaces and make it work? But, it's gonna take somebody who has a labor of love because it takes more to renovate the building than what it actually is worth on paper when it's done, so.
I have a question for you.
Yes, Judy.
A couple questions. When you, and I'm not sure whether it was you or Scott, but when you guys signed for the special use permit, was it your intention to pave the parking lot?
So I'll let Scott answer that because I didn't sign it, but that was my intention.
Yeah, I believe that was our intention. We knew that it was there and we knew we wanted to do that. We didn't know, nor had we done any research to find out what it would cost to do that. It seemed like a logical thing to do, but my,
It's okay.
it was not, and the fact that Beck Events doesn't own the parking lot was more of an oversight than anything else. I mean, we simply, yeah, okay, fine, you know, but Beck Events is just a company that doesn't even own property of any kind in the city of Harrisonville, just an operating shell.
So have you ever considered reapplying for the special use permit and garnering yourself an extension on the requirement to pave the parking lot so that you're not under the gun for that December 1st deadline? I know
Honestly,
that's,
it wasn't even on our radar, Judy, until John brought it up at the variance board meeting, and then Roger took a run at it. It wasn't even on our radar anymore.
I'd like to interject that this ordinance is not just one parking lot. We have multiple gravel parking lots, multiple businesses in town that have them. There's buildings that are vacant that have these. We had a concrete plant shut down over gravel, and we lost gosh knows how much in sales tax dollars by not having a concrete plant when we built 3 truck stops in the area. So, yes, it's not just one place. Beck's is definitely the most popular, the most, I guess you could say it's the spotlight because they're the busiest, they have the most traffic coming in and out of the businesses right now that have one. But it's more than just them. There's plenty of businesses around the town that have these. You know, American Legion has one. The city has, our parking lots out, some of the ball fields are gravel. And it's not just one place. You're talking about multiple places. So this was not brought for simply one business. If that was the case, obviously you would be looking at either extending the special use permit or a separate variance. If that was not the case, so we brought this as an ordinance, not as a variance. So
I don't think I was intimating that it was solely for the Beck, but that's the topic that's being discussed right now.
Judy, I just want to make sure I reiterate one thing. There was no intention at any time to mislead anyone on any part of this.
I know that. I know that.
You know, it was just,
okay.
it was brought up, but the Beck does not own that parking lot.
Mhm.
Can I, and Judy, I don't want to interrupt you,
No, go ahead.
can I take everybody through, and I'm not trying to eat up the whole, I know, I appreciate everyone's time here tonight too. This is a big weight on our shoulders. I want to take everybody through the quick timeline of 2015, from January 1st to March 15th. Was it March 15th when we, so my wife and I had felt called to open up an event space north of the river in Kansas City. We took it upon ourselves. It was, I'm not going to get into our faith base on this, but literally like we had set all the wheels in motion, financially got ready to do this, and then it fell through. And this was Thanksgiving of 2014. On January 1st, by happenstance of 2015, on New Year's Day, I came down to meet a friend. He's like, hey, let's go down to Bazaar. They've got some stuff for sale. And then all of a sudden, like, well, Dell's got all his buildings for sale. And I was like, I couldn't quite understand why we were led down a path, and once again, this is more of a faith thing, but just why we were led down a path and then it fell apart. And then all of a sudden, I met with Scott, who worked with me at Freeland Photography, and we went through a process and just said, hey, I feel like all this is set up for us to come back to Harrisonville. I worked here in the mid-90s, and I think this is maybe where I need to be, and I love the square. I love historics downtown. I see the potential, and I saw the potential, and nobody else saw the potential. I drug people and said, Scott, you've got to see this building. He's like, what in the heck is this? And we literally made an offer to Dell, January 31st, February 1st, and he kept countered with something ridiculous. And literally, we went to look at another place in Overland Park, Kansas, and I was like, okay, it's not meant to be. On March 1st, he said, okay, you can have the building and we'll include the 2 lots. You have to close by March 15th. It's a cash deal. I don't want you to inspect it at all. Once again, if I had known every number that would have gone in all this process 3.5 years later, there's no way I would have ever said yes. But once again, I have to say it was fate that brought me down here. And when you see how beautiful the building was, and just knowing how close it was to collapse, and then we're at this point as well too. I didn't even know that we needed a parking lot for our event space. You know, and once again, it's like, you know, from the people we started working with at the city, they have changed completely, and they're like, we'll work with you, we'll help you. And then we went to the Alderman board and said, hey, I guess we need, Scott's where Scott's like,
We didn't even know we needed a special use permit. We didn't know we had to ask you for that permission.
There's been so many potential roadblocks, but every time the doors open, and it's been amazing, and I think we're down here for a purpose. And I promise you that we will continue to help revitalize and donate our time and make this, we've got, between the two families, 5 teenage kids. This is our legacy down here, and we want to be down here. And please don't just look at a code and say, once again, I didn't want to go around and take these pictures of what the code looks like, but if you use common sense, our parking lot has the apron on there, we're not bleeding, even with the rain today, there's no, I can't see any, there's not any more gravel down around our street than what's already around downtown. So, once again, the other factors and all that, I'm just focused on the downtown square. I know all the business owners, ebb and flow, and when I've talked to them, there's many times where people feel like, you know, can we keep doing this? And small business in America is what makes us great, and just, I appreciate everybody's time. Sorry to talk so much tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak this evening? Seeing no one, I'm going to close public participation and move on to the approval of the minutes. Tonight we have the minutes from the regular meeting, Board of Alderman meeting of October 15th, 2018.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion from Alderman Dickerson and a second from Alderman Levison. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Moving on to our agenda items. Before we begin on these two items, I'd like Mr. Fairfield to explain, there was a issue with the numbering that he will explain and what we need to do to make sure this is clear.
The last board meeting, we had a first reading on Council Bill 68 and 69. When this agenda was prepared and published, inadvertently, they changed the numbers to 70 and 71, actually 71 and 70, I think, in that order. Because this is truly a second reading of Council Bill 68 and 69, I think this is just an inadvertent error, but I would recommend there be a motion of the board and approval to correct the agenda numbering of the council bills. I don't think that's an issue because you're not changing the substance of what the documents or that you had the first reading on, but just so that the agenda is correct. I understand that the city clerk has provided you with an agenda with the correct numbers on them, but since that one wasn't published, I think it just makes sense to do it this way. So that's being my recommendation. And I think a motion could be just to correct both of them, then we can move on to take them one at a time.
I make that motion.
It was actually published, but it just wasn't 24 hours in advance that it was published with the correct numbers.
I
So.
make that motion.
Okay, I have a motion from Alderman Dickerson, second from Alderman Long to approve the correct numbers. Any further discussion? Mr. Clerk, could I have a roll call on this one, please?
Okay. Alderman Levison.
Aye.
Alderman Turner.
Aye.
Alderman Long.
Aye.
Alderman Dickerson.
Aye.
Alderman Milner.
Aye.
Alderman Bockelman.
Aye.
Alderman Bowman.
Aye.
Alderman Reese is absent.
All right, so we have the updated numbers. So we will have Council Bill 69.
Council Bill, second reading, Council Bill 69, an ordinance of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Harrisonville, Missouri, repealing Code Section 405.550D, accessory detached buildings of the City Code, and enacting in lieu thereof a new Section 405.550D to allow detached accessory buildings in the C1, CBD1, C2, and CBD2 zoning districts.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. 3 comments this evening. First of all, we were asked to provide a definition of an accessory building. In our code, we call it we were asked to provide a definition of an accessory structure. In our code, we call it an accessory building, and we've got the definition there in your staff report. Just briefly, it's something that is incidental and customary to a primary use. We also wanted between first and second readings to better define where an accessory building can go into, in a rear yard. Like I said before, the accessory buildings in the commercial districts need to go in the rear yard. We've extended that to say, it may be permitted in a rear yard, providing it adheres to existing setback requirements for accessory buildings and is effectively screened so as not to be visible from any public street. And then, Mayor, John, there was some language that inadvertently got left out, so as not to be visible from any public street or residential neighborhood. So, well, if the board concurs with adding that back in, I think that'll need to be taken care of as an amendment.
Correct, correct, yeah.
You need to specify exactly where that is in your proposed change.
In the ordinance, in section 1, subsection D2, at the end of the first sentence, I guess I'll just read the sentence with the language added. For any C1, CBD1, C2, or CBD2 zone lot, one detached accessory building not to exceed 200 square feet may be permitted in the rear yard, providing it adheres to existing setback requirements for accessory buildings and is effectively screened so as not to be visible from any public street or residential neighborhood.
When you say screen, that would mean that either behind the building or behind the fence.
Correct. That's how we see it
That's the
also.
intention of it?
Yes, that is our intention.
Okay.
Do we have any buildings now that exist that are non-compliant?
Yeah, I mentioned the two that, I know of two that are down
Where
there.
are they?
One is the one behind the chamber office, and the other is the one behind the saddle leather.
Just south of the square on
Yeah.
Independent, or north on Independence, excuse me, the north of the square a little bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So those are the two that I'm aware of, and I haven't looked for any more.
And neither one's, they're kind of the examples, because neither one's visible, you know, to look at it. I think, were those supposed to be permitted to be there, or was that just a kind of it got done without?
Yeah.
Nobody noticed it because it's behind the building.
They just got done. The one behind the chamber occurred before I joined the city. The
Right.
one behind the saddle
Mhm.
shop, there's another name for saddle shops.
Mhm.
I mean, that gentleman did come in and asked, and I explained to him they weren't allowed, and he said, well, one's gone up, I'm gonna take my chances and go ahead and put it up.
So is it technically in their driveway behind their buildings, because there's a street
It's on-
that goes behind those buildings?
Yeah, there's an alley behind those
Correct.
buildings, but it's on their property,
So
not
it's
on the
basically in
alley.
their technically drive area of the
And they're on their
buildings.
property, yeah. or
They
drive.
would fit in what this ordinance is, they would fit that, so they would be covered by that, so.
Even with this ordinance, do they all still need a permit, no matter regardless of size?
Typically, we would just move on. I don't know if, I would have to talk to the building official about that. I don't know if we would go back and have them retroactively do a permit or not. Be happy to look into it, but I can't give you an answer right
No,
now,
well,
how
I
the
mean,
building
anything
official will
from-
handle that.
I mean, from here forward, I mean,
Oh.
any new,
Certainly, yeah, yeah. They would have to, from here forward, they would have to have a permit.
we just grandfather what's there.
Essentially, yeah, I mean, the two that are there, we're not gonna ask them to move.
No,
them, so-
right.
Right.
So basically, since we didn't have this before, they could do it. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
No, technically, you were not supposed to do it before.
Okay.
We didn't allow any accessory buildings in any of our commercial
It's still
districts.
unlawful.
but seeing that we were going to look at this ordinance, there was really no reason to ask either one to remove it. I mean, they're using them for what we basically described in here. It's extra storage for things that you would not want to store inside your building, so.
So, would it still have to be screened, even the current ones?
These two would not, because they're not visible They're not visible from a public street.
So the alley's not.
There is, yeah, the alley is not. I specifically said from a public, whether it's a public street, because I knew around the square we had ones that would be on alleys.
Right.
And did we take out, I'm just trying to look in here real quick, did we take out the, and maybe the size limitations will, the basic storage containers? Like the trucks in the back of the trucks?
That's the last comment that I want to make. I did make a change there. When we added in, when we added in the language that they have to be effectively screened so that they cannot be visible from a public street or a residential neighborhood, I increased the maximum square footage for an accessory building back up from 150 back up to 200. Now, what that would effectively mean is you could have the size of storage containers like what the Beck Event Space recently moved off their property. That's a 40-foot storage container. You could not have that. Those are about 360 square feet. But you could have the smaller version, which really wasn't talked about at Planning Commission. I think everybody was thinking about what they had seen on the property across from the event center. But the smaller storage containers are 160 square feet. So if we move the maximum up to 200, you could have the smaller 160 square foot storage containers. The reason I put that in there is we've got a lot of property all along commercial, up along 291, that's zoned C2. And I know we're going to get inquiries for the smaller storage containers because they are more secure than buildings. And I wanted us to talk about it, and I thought, you know, maybe the happy medium here is we don't allow the larger ones, which I knew the Planning Commission did not want. But in regards to the smaller ones, the 160 square foot, you know, this is written up so that it would allow those.
Did you change this before or after that committee?
Changed it between, after. I changed it between first and second
So they
readings.
didn't know that those would be allowed in?
No.
That's,
I'll tell you, at Planning Commission, we just talked about it, but somehow through the motions, nothing got put into, with regard to the storage containers. I just know from the dialogue that we had that they didn't want those in there. And again, at that time, we were thinking about the larger ones. I don't even think it was on anybody's radar screen that there's smaller ones.
We're talking about the the ones that would be like the pod storage that you can rent and put your stuff in and then it moves, and I mean that's the size I'm thinking in my head that you see on the little trucks.
Yeah. I know there's probably more than you ever wanted to know about storage containers, but I know the question's gonna come up from people that walk in City Hall.
well, and I guess my question is, I mean, I think my personal opinion is when people build a little barn or a little shed, they're normally an attractive, more so attractive building than what I consider used to be the back of a semi. I mean, that type of thing. Those to me are just not attractive. But again, I guess my biggest question is if planning and zoning or P&Z
It'd be P&Z.
didn't want those containers, and then after the fact we've added that ability to come back in, I think I have an issue with that.
Okay.
I don't mind the storage units that are built that actually look like something, but for people to just haul those things in and out and leave them, and they're just not attractive, and I don't know that that's what we want to see there.
Yeah, I assume that would be a point. I just want to say the only reason that I went ahead and put the smaller ones back in, and we may take them out tonight, but was just because I don't think anybody even realized there's smaller ones, so that's why I put them back in, but, you know, we'll need some direction from you all.
I don't so much have a problem with the smaller containers if we can identify what they need to look like. You know, I mean, whether it's, for example, the storage container that the Becks had, even though it was large, I mean, it was painted, it was gray, and it was painted, and it didn't look bad. But you get some of them that just come right off of the tractor trailers, and they're rusted and nasty looking, and, you know, if we're gonna allow those, then we need to perhaps be specific about what they need to look like.
Well, I mean, they're behind the building and they're screened. How are you gonna see it if it's screened? I mean,
Make sure you're using your microphone. Thank you.
I mean, we're making, put them behind the building and it's supposed to be screened. I mean, if we put it, it's not visible from the street, and it's behind the building and screened, how are we gonna see it? I mean, I know what you're saying, and I mean, they got it, but if they actually do it like they're supposed to and screen it,
Keyword there is if.
that's we'd have to enforce it.
Yeah.
I mean, but if it's screened, then we wouldn't be able to see it, we wouldn't know what it looks like. I mean, I agree, the ones buildings that look just like the building, or the little roof and siding, look a heck of a lot better, but if they want a little storage container, but as long as it's behind the building and screened, you can't see it from the street, how are you even gonna know it's there?
Well,
Or what it looks like?
I think we just need to really be mindful about the appearance of the city, that's all, the only point I'm making.
Right,
Well, I think that's the point he's making. It's out of sight. It's
you
not
can't see it,
invisible.
it's screened.
That's a good point.
Unless you go into their property behind their building, so unless they invite you in, you're not gonna see it.
I got a question. You know, talking about 18-wheelers, what about the trailers that are just dropped off in parking lots?
Oh, so you're thinking even like just with wheels and stuff still on?
Yeah.
That's a
I
good
mean, I
point.
can think of 4 right
Yeah.
now.
That's a real good point.
This would not take into consideration the trailers. I don't know off the top of my head what the parking requirements are with regard to trailers. Chief, do you? Okay, we'll have to get back to you on that. That would not be involved in this.
That's what they're doing as, I mean, like prime example, I mean, but mine was behind, screened in, privacy fence, no one could see it, behind my building that I used to store tires in. And they come and picked it up once a month and hauled it off and dropped me off an empty one.
Yeah, usually if something's enclosed or completely screened, it's not a problem.
That's what I was
Right,
saying.
but
Do we have a
there's,
definition?
Well, they can't see it.
there's others
Yeah.
No
that
city streets or
are
residents could see it.
that are sitting right in a parking lot, paved
But-
parking lot.
Is this a fixed, are we talking about a fixed structure or a mobile structure? I think that's the difference here.
Right,
Is
because
that
I
what you're
wouldn't
thinking?
consider a shipping container an accessory building. That's a completely different thing, and I mean, like, are we building an accessory building, or are we allowing shipping containers?
Containers to be dropped.
Because I mean, I don't know if we can look up, I thought that like even in our residences were required for their buildings to be, their color scheme to be similar. It seems like I read that somewhere in our codes book. So why wouldn't we require the business to be, you know, their look to be palatable too? I wouldn't care if there was a building out there, honestly, if it wasn't screened in, if it looked nice.
Right.
But a shipping container is not an accessory building, that's a different thing.
What I'm thinking.
So I don't think that should be anywhere in there, but that's my opinion.
Good point.
The way that oftentimes shipping containers are handled is they're treated like a building if they're put on a foundation and anchored down to the ground. I realize it's not what you typically think of as a building, but if you come in and we haven't had this situation here, but typically if you have the foundation and you anchor it to the ground, it's treated as a building, even though it looks like a shipping container.
And I guess I'm like you, I was thinking an accessory building is something that is built, not something that is dropped. Yeah.
Or a pre-built, I mean, they have
Correct.
some nice pre-built
Correct.
buildings, but they're not shipping containers.
So is there a definition on, I mean, it's not really defined in there, is it?
I mean,
The shipping container, no.
see, some people are making houses have
I know.
shipping containers.
I know.
It's
Is
still a
the city of
house.
Harrisonville allowing that? I mean, that's a whole other subject.
Well, yeah, man, but I'm just saying, we're using shipping containers for
So if we
everything.
go back up to the 200 feet, that you mentioned originally, then that eliminates the shipping containers.
No, if we keep it at 150
150,
feet.
that eliminates the shipping.
Exactly, yeah,
200 just provides for a little bit bigger
yeah.
accessory building. I guess it comes down to what somebody's definition of the building. I see both sides of it. I see the idea of a shipping container as a handy form of storage. However, I also agree, a shipping container is a shipping container. It's not a building. It's not a temporary building. So what I'm hearing is, sounds like most are in support of having the temporary building. They just don't like the idea of the shipping container. So.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Yeah, if you all would prefer, feel safer, not even allowing the shipping containers at this point or until they get talked about more so, why don't we just leave the maximum size at 150 square feet?
I think that's a better choice. I mean, I think that kind of solves that, eliminates that.
Well, okay, here's another side of it though. Say if you later decide that you want to entertain the shipping container, more ideas, like you said, some of you said you were okay with them if you had them better defined. If you go ahead and set it at 200, but say shipping containers, I mean, they're not, you can say they're not, per this ordinance, they're not classified as a building. You can drop that piece out of it, and you can, you're going to have to vote on an amended version of this anyway, because there's been changes made by staff from the first reading. So if you want to make an amendment that to accept changes but exclude storage containers, you could do that. Or you could make a motion to drop it back to the 150 feet, square feet. Either way solves the storage.
I think the first reading was at 150 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So
you would have to amend.
So you wouldn't amend that.
If that was okay,
you could amend, there could be a motion to amend the ordinance for what staff has provided, except for the change from 150 to 2, because the first reading was already
150, and that's fine. That would be the easiest way if you don't like the shipping container. So
Make that motion.
okay, so we're clear for I have a motion from Alderman Dickerson to accept the first reading with the changes that, except with but it's amended with staff's changes that were made. It will be 150 feet, not the 200 that was put in the paper. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. I have a motion from Alderman Dickerson and a second from Alderman Bowman. All right, any further discussion?
This still says shipping containers though in the ordinance. That's what I have an issue with.
You don't want shipping containers in the ordinance?
No, I don't think it should be in there.
Well, I don't.
You're making the motion.
Because I think we're opening.
Is it in there?
I want to
Yep.
read what staff
It's a
recommends.
B,
We'll change it and change it later.
No, let's do it right.
No, let's get it right.
Keep out 350 feet.
Rewrite the whole thing.
Is it in there?
It is. It's under B, where he read before.
It's the paragraph after B.
It talks about Beck's Event Center just above that, or just below that.
Is that in the
That's
memo?
That's
Is that in the cover, is that in the cover memo perhaps?
Yeah.
It's not in the ordinance.
It's not in the
Yeah,
ordinance
come on.
itself, so
Oh,
now
okay.
it's not part of the ordinance. So now
Sorry,
we're good.
guys.
Okay, so,
Alright,
No,
I was just reading it, so.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Staff changes were,
The changes as he's read, other than it's not, which is
So
the,
even if it's out of the line of sight,
right, if the change is that it's out of the line of sight, that's what was,
has to be screened.
what he worked in was how it's visual to the public, I guess, is, if you want to sum it up.
It's the changes on 6A, packet page 11 and 12, with the addition at the end of the first sentence, or residential neighborhood. I'm assuming that was Alderman Dickerson's motion, except that the 200 feet shall be 150.
Which is what the original,
Which is what the original reading did.
so we don't need to amend that, because that was.
You're not amending that because that was the original.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Would it be easier to table this, let you rewrite this, and bring it back next time? Would that be a simpler fix?
I
No,
mean,
I'm just asking.
I mean, this will be, I mean, it'll be written,
Okay.
I mean, it's basically, what he would bring back is what you're voting on now.
I just want to make sure that what we're voting on is what's written.
Yeah, really, we're accepting the original, which was the 150, which did not include the storage
Okay.
containers.
Okay.
It just added, before what we talked about was adding the language of how can you visually see the building? It was, how is it not visible to the public? And that's what we're adding in, so.
Okay.
All right, any other comments? Now, this vote is for the amendment, and then we'll have to have a vote on the actual ordinance as amended, if passed. So I'll need a roll call for the amendment, please.
Alderman Dickerson.
Aye.
Alderman Livingston.
Aye.
Alderman Reese is absent. Alderman Long.
Aye.
Alderman Bowman.
Aye.
Alderman Milner.
Aye.
Alderman Turner.
Aye.
Alderman Bachman. Aye.
All right,
So what will the
we don't need a
amendment say?
second reading as amended, correct?
No.
All right, now, we have amended it, now we will have a roll call vote. This is for whether or not to approve the
You've
amended
amended,
version
you've now amended
Council
the
Bill-
second reading
of Council Bill 69.
of Council Bill 69. Now you're voting on it as amended.
But we're not real sure what the amendment actually says.
No, the amendment is specified on packet page 11 and 12 with the addition at the end of the first sentence, or residential neighborhood, and exceed 150 square feet instead of 200. That's what you're
The
voting.
paperwork says 200, but the original one was 150. We took it
The
back.
original
that's the
reading
amendment.
was at 150, so you're just
So
not
we didn't
changing.
amend that piece. That stayed as the original, so that piece did not change. All right, roll call, please.
Alderman Long.
Aye.
Alderman Bowman. Alderman Milner.
Aye.
Alderman Turner.
Aye.
Alderman Bachman.
Aye.
Alderman Dickerson.
Aye.
Alderman Livingston.
Aye.
Alderman Reese, absent.
All right, and Council Bill 69 will become ordinance 03451. Council Bill 68.
Second reading, Council Bill 68, an ordinance of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Harrisonville, Missouri, repealing Code Section 405.565 D1, the improvement of parking areas in the city code, and enacting in lieu thereof a new Section 405.565 D1 to allow greater use of gravel instead of concrete and asphalt.
Yes, Mayor and Board, two comments here. In your staff report, you'll see we were asked for a map that shows the zoning districts of where the gravel exceptions would be allowed, the near downtown zoning districts. The map's in the staff report. Just roughly, it's the area north of, the area that's shaded and with red property lines, north of the middle school and the football field, and then west commercial. The second comment is we talked to Rodney Jacobs afterwards in more detail about the approaches, and based upon that discussion, and you have his memo in your packet, based on his comments, what we've done is we've amended the ordinance, and again, this was Rodney's recommendations, that if there is no sidewalk, a hard surface driveway connection shall be constructed a minimum of 10 feet from the driving surface. If there is a sidewalk, and you may have noticed in his memo that sometimes the distance isn't always 10 feet from the driving surface to the sidewalk. Sometimes it's 8 feet, sometimes it's 15 feet. So but if there is a sidewalk that is either existing or planned, then the driving connection shall extend from the driving surface to the sidewalk, or 10 feet, whichever is greater.
Should that say to the inside of the sidewalk?
It could. We just said to the sidewalk.
Yeah, that could be interpreted. Can we use my,
How could it be it mean it either goes to the sidewalk or it doesn't? Is that?
Alderman Bachman, could you use your microphone so they can hear you better? Okay.
the sidewalk's 4 feet wide, do you put it to the outside toward the street side, or to the inside toward the outside?
It stays from the street to the sidewalk, so I think it's,
To the sidewalk, but which side of the sidewalk?
well, as long as it connects to the sidewalk, I think what they're proposing, it doesn't matter.
Right, if
It was intended that it be the inside, it was intended to be the street side of the sidewalk, not to
Overlap.
pave over the sidewalk.
True, but you know how people around here interpret things.
Oh, yeah.
That's for sure.
All right.
Okay, my other question was depth. So we're talking 10 foot this way, but did we ever
Yes,
determine the depth?
yes.
How far in it has to go into the driveway?
That's what
How
we're
far in the
referring to, the
driveway?
distance from the road to the driveway, is 10 foot. Rod,
I thought we were talking sidewalk to sidewalk 10 foot.
Well, okay, well, okay, say you come in off the road, say you have a driveway and you turn into the driveway, and it's 10 foot, exactly 10 foot to the edge of the sidewalk where you would step foot on the sidewalk.
Okay.
That's where your approach would stop, is at the edge of the sidewalk. Now, say the sidewalk is 4 feet from the road, you would go to the edge, and then you would have an additional couple feet on the other side of the sidewalk, because am I correct, it's
No.
the greater, the way it's
It's the
written?
greater, it
It's
would
the
have to
greater,
be at least 10 feet.
whichever's
in
greater,
depth.
whichever's greater.
Right.
If the sidewalk is 15 feet from the road, you would have to go 15 feet to reach the sidewalk, which,
If, the way it's written is certainly the intention, and if we need to clarify, we can do that. There was a lot more changes to this, and I actually changed with staff to kind of clarify that issue. In my mind, the way it's written now, you would have to go at least 10 feet. If the sidewalk is farther than 10 feet, you have to go to the sidewalk. So it's whichever is greater.
Yes.
So if the sidewalk is only, let's say the distance between the street and the sidewalk is only 2 or 3 feet, you would have to go at least 10 feet of paving. So if the sidewalk's 4 feet, then you're 3 feet, then you've got to make up the difference on the other side. So there's a minimum of 10 feet of depth towards the parking lot for the width of the drive. So some drives will be different widths. So whatever that width is, you have to go 10 feet in depth into the property.
and this only applies to, say there's an existing house that burns, that had a gravel driveway, and they decide to rebuild a house on the lot, then if they want to keep the gravel, they're going to have to put the approach in to keep part of the gravel driveway. Otherwise, the way it's written now, it would be, the driveway would be paved. And so what we had gotten from staff that Roger had reported is we had had some builders requesting to keep the gravel. So this was kind of the compromise for them. The existing gravel driveways are unaffected. They're already
Correct.
They're already in there. You can maintain your drive. You can add to keep the gravel up as long as you've had it. It's an existing driveway. It has absolutely no effect on that. That part of the ordinance isn't changing. All we're doing is adding the, for driveways, is the ones that are 100 foot or longer, and they have the approach. And then if somebody was to rebuild on an existing lot that had the driveway, and then again, we're not talking about very many around town that we would have that. So this is kind of the compromise to promote some of the building in that area, saying, okay, we'll allow it, but we want some improvement. We want the concrete, so you're not getting gravel. Rodney's memo mentions, really, it's not the depth that's an issue, it's the incline, if there's any incline for that approach. And then the other comment that when I spoke with him about it was, he said, well, a lot of the roads that these are on are chip and seal anyway, so they're gravel, and the gravel just gets pushed into the chip and seal, so it's not an issue as far as the road's concerned there.
And I think I still, and I think I said it last time, I think the only issue I have, if it's an existing gravel, I don't have a problem with that. I do understand that we need to improve the entryway at some point, but if either the property is sold and the house is taken down and it's a whole new build there, I still feel like the driveway needs to be concrete. You know, we talked about this last time, the little house down here on Mechanic that Kevin Miller built, that is concrete. It is not gravel. And he didn't have a problem with that. I feel like if it's a new build on an existing property, it needs to be concrete.
Mr. Crowe, how many inquiries did you have from builders who wanted to retain gravel driveways?
You know, I can't answer that question. I don't know if this was, this was conversations that the building official had with these builders, and I didn't ask him less than 5, greater than 5, I don't know.
Okay.
All right.
I make a motion to approve Bill 68.
Well, we'd have to do it. This is another one where there was changes by staff and the attorney, so we'd have to.
Okay, then I make a motion to
Just say to
amend.
What is this gonna do?
yeah, approve the proposed amendment to
Yeah.
Council Bill 68.
What he said.
Okay. I had a motion from Alderman Dickerson to approve the amendments, the amended version of Council Bill 68 as written by staff and Mr. Fairfield's additions.
I second that.
I have a second from Alderman Long. Now, is there any further discussion?
Okay, so this is now where we're talking about Bex, not Bex.
The ordinance, any changes made.
Bex but not Bex.
The ordinance
Right.
contains.
It would include them.
The ordinance contains basically three parts,
Yes.
if you want to look at it. It
Yes.
contains the addition.
The driveway.
Allowing the driveway to stay with the approach,
The gravel
the
Parking
100-foot
lots.
driveway, which that
Yes.
one's kind of a no-brainer,
and the parking lot.
and then the parking lots.
Yes.
So,
I agree with you. You bought an existing gravel lot. And what we're doing is we're not making, anybody else improve. Would we love to see you improve that? Absolutely. Would we love to maybe see you, let's say, 3 years, 5 years max? We would love to see that have some kind of a hard surface and balanced out, which I'm sure you all would love to see that happen too, because it would be good for your business.
I think seeing what they've done with that building. is a pretty
Absolutely,
good
but that building
guarantee
sits
that
on
I
a
probably
totally
won't have.
different lot, David. We're talking about the
I
gravel lot.
agree, but I think
So,
that these two
but
guys
again,
have let
it
it
wasn't
go forward.
attached to the building,
okay.
so.
Not to be
No,
approved,
go
but
ahead.
remind you, you're to address myself and the board, not the audience, on what we're discussing for an ordinance, so.
Okay, I won't look at you.
I'm just,
Sorry about that, guys.
Okay.
I see their point. They had terrible overruns. I would still love to see the possibility down the road for that to be improved. I don't know whether we go back and try and do another, contract of some sort that says, within 3 to 5 years, we want to try and do this. I mean, this basically just lets it stay the way it is.
I think we should have faith in these two guys. They
Oh,
brought a beautiful thing to
absolutely.
this town,
What?
to the square that
They
on
brought
this
a
board. they
building,
have
but
been
we're talking about a
asking
gravel
us
lot.
to- Doesn't matter.
It does matter,
Sometimes we
because
have.
that's what
Okay,
we're
it's
talking
not
about.
it's not an argument, guys. It's
So,
if you
I
have
would
an
love to
opinion.
see that happen maybe down the road, but, they bought a gravel lot, that's what they
Does
bought.
anybody else have a comment?
I do. I'm a little concerned when we want to change an ordinance. We've had 3 requests for variance related to gravel. We had Mr. Bockelman's in November of 2017 for his property at 501 North Main. We had Mr. John Coffey on June the 12th for his property at 310 Clearwater. And we had Stephen Lytle in July of 2018 for his property at 2515 Southeast Outer Road. So we've had 3 requests for ordinances, or variances on ordinance. I'm a little bit troubled by establishing the precedent of this ordinance, because what happens if we have another business in town that says, I don't want to pave my parking lot? We've established the precedent if we allow that. I would much prefer that we have them reapply for their special use permit, grant them some additional time to do whatever it takes to gather the money or get the loan to pave the parking lot, step back, take the time to see what other options might be out there. There may be some green solutions that we talked about with the engineer from Burns and Mac. We've got a stormwater issue there, and I think we ought to just step back and study and see what other options are available that will help them get their parking lot paved, help us improve the corner of the 4 corners. The 4 corners is the most visible intersection that we have in town. And people see that all the time when they come in and out of our city. So my preference would be not that we change the ordinance that affects all businesses in town, but that we grant an extension to these men whom, as you have said, have brought a great business to our city. We recognize that. We want them to stay here, and we want them to be successful. So perhaps a better solution for everybody is to grant them an extension, so then they have more time to do the work to the parking lot. unfinished.
You know, we did that with the Optimist Club on their baseball.
Just soccer,
Goal, huh?
soccer fields.
Soccer field. They kept getting a special use permits, 5 of them, I believe, they got, never did it, and then finally they disbanded. So that doesn't solve anything. You have to have trust in the business community. You're always talking about you want to bring business to Harrisonville. This is the reason why there isn't any. This discussion tonight, I've been on this board a long time, and I can name you a dozen buildings in this town that got stopped and didn't get, and would nobody buy them because of the gravel parking lot, and the city insisting that they blacktop it at out of their expense. They had no money to operate on, they had no inventory bought, and the first thing we want is a blacktop parking lot. If you want businesses to come, you may have to give them some time to make some money to make their gravel parking lot blacktop.
I agree, and that's what I just said. Grant them some additional
We need to
time.
okay this and let these good guys do the job they've been doing. Let them, they love this square.
I'm not
And this
questioning that.
discussion is standing in their way and stomping on their dreams. Their lot is not ugly. There's not a thing wrong with it. It was half gravel all my life that I've lived in this town, which you haven't. And that's a big deal to me, that you're trying to change something that's been in existence
Had
since I, yeah.
businesses on it.
And Marcy, you've lived here all your life.
I absolutely
You know,
have, when
and
there were businesses on that
and
lot.
there was buildings, and it was horrible looking when those buildings were up there. It
And I
looks
think
much
that's
better now.
exactly what we're saying, David. We would love to see them be very
I
successful.
agree, but
And-
let them do it on their own.
But if we do this now, then we're allowing every other business to come in without there being.
Okay, hold on. This comment about every business, this is to allow, if you buy a building that has an existing gravel lot, you can leave it. You
Yeah.
can't go buy the old Walmart and say, hey, I
I'm not
wanna turn
talking
it
about
into,
the old
you
Walmart.
you can turn it into gravel. And that's what David's trying to point out, and I have to agree that I've talked to other people that have looked at buildings. There was a building out there in the industrial park. They wanted to pave the entire drive and parking area behind where that building was really just used for industrial use. There was absolutely zero reason. It already had a blacktop surface in the front of the building, and there were several places that just said, we're not gonna go in there.
We
We're not going to invest in that. So you have plenty of places around town that have these gravel driveways or parking lots. They've had them. Just because the business changes, this should have been grandfathered a long time ago. I don't know why it wasn't.
So we're not talking then about new building. Let's say we've got an empty lot. Somebody's gonna come in and build a commercial lot on it, even a residential lot. So what we're saying, even new, get to keep gravel.
No.
Now, if there's an empty lot with a gravel parking lot, where did the gravel parking lot come from? I mean, you couldn't build a structure on that. You couldn't build a structure on that. I mean, why would there be a parking
If
lot?
they sold their parking lot, nobody could come in, buy it, and put a building on it?
Somebody could put a building on it, yes.
And
I mean,
then
if
they're gonna
someone-
leave everything on it gravel?
If
Is
it
that
was,
what we're
if
saying?
it,
But
if
that's
it is,
my
if
question.
it is
Is that what we're
if
saying?
if a lot is grandfathered, then it would be if it had existing gravel.
I thought it was a new building.
Well, no,
They put a new building on it, then it would have to be.
Okay.
yeah, the new
That's
building,
my-
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I wanted to make
okay,
sure.
I'm sorry.
That's what I
What I'm
wanted to
talking
make
about
sure.
is somebody reuses the building, I'm sorry, yeah, I agree,
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, yeah, a new building.
That's what I wanted to make
Right, so
sure.
if you were to demo a building that had one,
Absolutely.
yeah, you were going to have
Then
to.
you have to.
Right, I agree, okay,
But on houses, we're not going to do that.
right,
Single family.
single family. But we are going to ask for the 10-foot approach. So, all right,
So,
Any other-
no, I want some clarification. If there's a new home built and there's an existing gravel driveway and a new structure built, they have to pave the driveway.
no, they have to put the approach.
They do not have to pave it.
On residential, it's a difference between residential and commercial. On a residential, we're asking them to improve the approach. Again, from what we got from staff about having builders that would like to keep the gravel, we felt this was a compromise. You're getting the approach that keeps the gravel off the road, but they can still keep some of the gravel driveway intact.
And that's just in the R1B, R2B.
You're only talking, and that's only if a house was to go away, you're talking about very few lots, so.
Right, it's limited to a specific
Correct.
to some specific zoning districts.
If they have to go in 10 feet, for the most part, most of the builders are gonna finish it.
They
I
very
mean, it's
likely
just,
could.
it's just silly, they're not gonna do the 10
Very
feet.
likely they could.
The cost is gonna be minimal, you're talking about, it might cost them $2,000 more to go up the rest of it by the time you do all the labor. So I don't see that even happening. I mean, it's in there, I don't necessarily love it,
Okay.
but it's not just about Beck. I hate that we
Absolutely.
keep bringing that up like this is about them, because I know how hard it is to run a small business and start one and keep it going. It is just ridiculous that we don't just go ahead and allow this. Not for Beck. I'm not even gonna say because it's not about them. It's about keeping our businesses going and not bankrupting. And I don't know how anybody can look at this and go, oh, well, you should be able to come up with $500,000 in a few years. Like,
Okay. All right. Any other comments? I have a motion and a second. And before there is a roll call, I want to address the concern about there being a conflict. Alderman Bowman already mentioned. The property, Alderman Bachman does own the property on Main. He did receive a variance. This does not affect him in any way because he already has his variance. There is no personal gain to be had, so there is no conflict for him to vote. So, I will need a roll call, please.
Alderman Dickerson,
Aye.
Alderman Levison,
aye.
Alderman Reese is absent, Alderman Long,
Aye.
Alderman Bowman,
Aye.
Alderman Milner,
Aye.
Alderman Turner,
Aye.
and Alderman Bachman. Aye.
All right, and Council Bill 6-8.
Wait a minute. You just,
Oh, I'm sorry, that was the amended. I apologize, we gotta have the,
you
got ahead of myself.
voted to amend it,
right, now we need the second.
to vote as amended.
So now we need, I'm sorry, now we need the roll call for the amended version, thank you.
Alderman Long,
Aye.
Alderman Bowman,
Aye.
Alderman Milner,
Aye.
Alderman Turner,
Aye.
Alderman Bachman, Alderman Dickerson,
Aye.
Alderman Levison,
Aye.
and Alderman Reese is absent.
All right, now, Council Bill 68 will become ordinance 03452. Council Bill 70.
First reading, Council Bill 70, fiscal year 2019 budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. Presented this evening is the 2019 budget at $35,730,045. It's presented as a balanced budget. We started this process with the public hearing for the tax levy. The tax levy did not increase, and that was passed. And then we've had several work sessions to go over the budget as presented. All the department directors presented to you their operations and their capital requests. And so this goes through and puts all that information together. General fund provides operations for a park, for the emergency medical services. It also provides much of the capital needs for the park and improvements and capital needs for the community center and EMS, including ambulances and fire trucks. So, or a fire truck lease purchase. So this, in the summary, it outlines those capital requests so you can see those in detail on what was requested and the operations for that. And I will be happy to entertain any questions that you may have in reference to this, but it was discussed in detail at your work sessions, and I felt like it went very well and was very pleased with the conversations and the approvals that were recommended at that point in time that are presented for you to pass at first reading. At this point, I don't recommend that we have a waiving of the rules. I think it needs to resonate with, the citizens and you all for the next 2 weeks and be brought back for second reading on the 19th to comply with our existing code.
Okay, did anybody have any?
Before we go any further, I think it's appropriate, since the true title of the ordinance is a bit bigger than what's in the agenda, that I reread that and then that be part of the second, which reads, an ordinance adopting an operating budget for the city of Harrisonville, Missouri for the fiscal year January 1, 2019 through December 31, 2019.
Okay. All right, so now it's
It's
official.
just a first reading,
Yeah.
so that, and just as in the future, I've asked the city clerk to show under the agenda separated between first readings and second readings, so it's a bit clearer when it gets published.
Does anybody have anything from when we had our budget meetings that they needed to bring forward, anything new?
I had one question.
Sure.
And I don't know if this has really anything to do with, I mean, it does the budget because obviously it's money, but whatever happened about the whole deal with the Justice Center owing us $140,000 on the water?
We're paying back monthly payments.
Yes. To be quite honest, I need to look, because before I answer that question, but, you know, those were put together as a 12-month or, you know, sooner process. And so those were agreed upon and added to the utility bills at that point in time. So it was addressed with each monthly utility bill.
So they paid over time? And
I will be more than happy to verify that to ensure that that money was repaid and that was the process that took place. That's what I'm remembering, but I don't want to say for sure.
Well, I just don't
without
remember
looking.
it ever being talked about again afterwards.
It probably wasn't, because it was defined at that point in time that this is how we were going to present that. The code was amended to address those issues, and going forward, that's the way any of those have taken place, because that was a directive given at that point in time. I think you're due a summary, if I recall, towards the end of the year, to recap anything that we did like that for the year, but I will be more than happy to look and make sure.
Okay, I was just curious about it.
Sure.
Turned the water on this morning and I thought about it.
I'm glad your water came on this morning, that's really a good thing.
any other questions, comments? I have one, and since they're not there, I don't know who all was, I don't know that there was anybody in attendance for those meetings. This was the fourth budget cycle since I've been up here, and it was definitely the smoothest and the best. There was good discussion. The board members should be applauded for their work on this budget, because we got a lot done, and there was, I think, a lot of good compromise on making sure things got done right. So to me, it was a perfect example of how a budget session should go. So it was a great job by the board, and my hat's off to them for doing a fine job, and we have a good budget in front of us. So I want to thank them and thank the staff for all their hard work on the budget. So it's one of the tougher things to do during the year is get the budget ready. So
Good thing I was here.
that's right.
Thanks, Martha. Well, no, thank you all, because it has. I've enjoyed this year too, because it's worked a lot smoother, and so I've been pleased.
It has been a whole lot easier compared to the previous budgets. I do applaud.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that concludes our agenda items tonight. We'll have second reading of the budget at the next meeting. That moves us on to Alderman and committee reports. Alderman Bowman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wearing my Wildcat blue tonight because our Harrisonville High School sports teams are rocking it. Congratulations to the football boys and the soccer boys for their wins, and certainly wish them continued success. I want to give a shout out to staff tonight, particularly Tim Scott and John Johnson. They did some awesome tree trimming for some constituents that were having some issues with tree limbs on electrical wires, so I want to thank them for that. And then lastly, I just want to remind everybody to get out and vote tomorrow. It's important elections. Thank you.
All right. Alderman Bachman. Alderman Miller.
Tomorrow night, the boys soccer team plays here at the stadium for the
District sectional.
world. They're playing for the world. They're so excited. I mean,
Not yet.
no, anyway. But they are very excited. They have
I heard
played
they've
their
been
hearts out
thumping
the last few weeks, and they have earned it. So they will be there tomorrow night. I believe the game's at 4:30.
Wow.
Is it 6? Is it 6?
All
Okay.
right. Very
I saw
good.
something come across my computer today, but yeah.
Very good.
So try to attend.
All right. Alderman Dixon.
Under the lights.
I'd just like to thank the board for coming together on the gravel situation. It's something that's been needed a long time. Maybe some of these buildings that have been sitting vacant now can move forward, and we can get somebody in them. Thank you all very much.
Alderman Long.
Saturday, the Cass County Rescue Mission is having their 7th annual Thanksgiving dinners from 11 to 5. And everyone's welcome. This, at the old youth building.
Alderman Levison.
I second what Alderman Dickerson said, and I also want to say to the parents out there, explain to your kids why you vote, and get out there and show them, and don't be afraid to take them too. They love it when they show up, I'm sure of it. That's it.
All right, Mr. Welch?
Just an update on the report that we sent out with the packet. On item 5, what I talked about, we submitted an application for the Brownfield voluntary cleanup program. That's for the old electric water plant down on Independence. I got a letter today from DNR, says that it will be about a 60-day process before we can get a report for the phase 1 assessment. So we have been accepted, no cost to the city.
Awesome.
Mr. Welch and I had, and Alderman Bowman will certainly be familiar with Chapels in the North Kansas City, had lunch there today and mentioned to Mr. Chappell that Mr. Welch was from the city of Harrisonville, so he took us over to show. He has a Harrisonville football helmet on his ceiling. He has hundreds of football from around the country and from the local area, and he has that Harrisonville helmet on his ceiling as well. He knew exactly where it was.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. Anything else?
That's it.
All right.
Do we have a computer?
That was, yeah, yep.
Wasn't there something?
No, I think we're done with everything. We had,
Okay.
yeah, we had 3 weekends in a row of drop-offs. I think that's okay. Yeah, I wanna thank staff for, I had taken advantage of the brush drop-off. I bought a pole saw, thought it'd be great fun, and next thing I know, I got several large piles of branches, so it was a very much appreciated event, and I don't know if you've ever taken advantage, it's great. You drive down there, you don't have to do anything, they pull everything off, they unload it, I mean, runs very smooth, but looked like we had a pretty good turnout. I don't know the numbers from it, but there was a steady stream while I was there. The only other thing I'd comment to is, remind everybody to get out and vote. Tomorrow's the day to celebrate the end of the political ads on TV and the radio. We can all have a drink and enjoy the peace and quiet finally. I think this election has definitely run its course for most people. I think they're just ready to see all that go away, but it is an important thing to go vote. There's a lot of people that don't have that right in the world. Oh, one other thing that I believe Mr. Freeland mentioned, next, or Sunday is the Veterans Appreciation at, is it actually at your, last year they did it on the square, does it actually start? Starts down, okay, starts down there.
Space and then goes up to the square.
Okay, if you've not attended that, I know I saw several of the aldermen, I know I saw Alderman Bowman there last year. It's a great event. There's a pretty big turnout. I think it's really nice to get out there and express appreciation. Veterans are really the only true heroes and to me, the bravest people on earth, that if you sign up to do that, you never know what you're getting in for. So I think we owe them a lot, and just a little bit of appreciation goes a long way. So hope to see everybody there. Hope everybody has a safe weekend. And
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would interject that Katie's Catering from Peculiar is providing free breakfast that morning. So it's 10:30 at the Beck Event Center, and so come and get free breakfast and then acknowledge the end of World War I.
Yep, so should be, like I said, should be a great event, and hope to see many of you there. So.
Also, one thing, if you haven't seen it, check our Facebook page. Daniel Barnett's been working on a series on World War I veterans from Cass County, and we're doing that up until the 11th. So we have 11 veterans, or 11 stories we're putting on there. So if you haven't seen that yet, check it out.
Very good.
And one more thing, since you just said that about him, and I assume that's who was doing it, the school, Jill Filer, would definitely like to thank you very much for popping on after she posts stuff school-wise. I mean, it's like almost instantaneously it shows up on the city's website, so it's been kind of fun to watch. So thank you for that.
You're doing a great job, is what
Yeah,
that equates
absolutely.
to, so good job. All right.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion from Alderman Dickerson and a second from Alderman Milner. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.